Hi everybody, and welcome to Student Projects for Spark Game Jam 2016. I'm Derek, and I'm going to be walking you through our first student project, which we call Pencils or Spark Painter. It's basically a app that we've made in Scratch that allows you to paint by using a pencil to draw on the screen. It's got some ability to change colors. We've got the ability to change the size of the pen to make it bigger and smaller, and then we've also got the ability to clear off the screen completely and start from scratch. So, no pun intended. I'm going to walk you through each part of the project, and I'll give you some little breaks in between so that you can follow along. Feel free to customize it as much as you want. Feel free to expand it. If you think of a cool idea or something that you want to make it do that it doesn't do right now, you're more than welcome to go off on there. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first thing, we're going to start with a new Scratch project, and because we're not going to be using a character or making a game or an animation or anything like that, we're just going to right click on Scratch the Cat here, which is our first sprite, and just click delete. That'll get rid of it and start us off with a blank stage with no sprites or anything else. Okay, so I'm going to add in a sprite from our library, which is this first icon that looks like a character, and because this is a painting program, I'm going to scroll down and find something like a paintbrush or a pencil. Pencil's right there, so that's perfect. And add that to my scene. You're more than welcome to add whatever you want, but for now we're going to start with a pencil just to match what we have on the website. Now the pencil, when you start it off, looks pretty big. You can drag it around and it doesn't really do anything because we just have the sprite on there. But it's pretty big, so the first thing we want to do is change the size of it a little bit. So in my Scratch blocks here in the middle, the scripts, I'm going to go to looks, since that's where all of our blocks are for the way that something looks. And I'm going to just look through these really quickly and find something that sets the size. So right here I see I've got a set size to 100% block. So I'm going to grab that, drag it in here, and set the size to something like 50%. Now, this isn't going to do anything until I double click on this. So once I double click on it, it should set the pencil to 50%. And now that looks a little bit more manageable. So if you want to make it even smaller than that, you're more than welcome to. We can try doing that. It just gets smaller and smaller as you go. I wouldn't suggest making it too small because obviously you want it to match what you're actually drawing so that the size of the pen or pencil tip is the same as the actual pencil. But for right now, I think somewhere between 25 and 50% is probably a good size to start off with. So we're going to do that. I'm going to save this block here. We technically don't need it again once we've set the size initially, but I want to make sure that this gets reset each time. So I'm going to leave this block here and we can use that later on. Okay, our next step is just to get the pencil to move around. In this case, we want it to follow the mouse cursor so that when we're actually painting, it follows exactly what the mouse does so we can use the mouse to control it. And that's under the motion section. Okay, so motion has an option to go to the mouse pointer. So if I choose that option and toss that into my Scratch project, right now, our pencil is going to set its size to 35% and then go to mouse pointer. Now, if you've never used Scratch before, we don't actually start our program or our app or our game until we hit this green flag. So Scratch has a special block under the events section that basically says to do this stuff when the program starts. So I'm going to drag that in so that when I start this program, the pencil jumps right to my mouse cursor. Okay. Now Scratch does everything in exactly the order we tell it, the way that we tell it to. So right now, anytime I click the green flag, it's going to set the size of our pencil to 35%, and then it's going to go to the mouse pointer. Okay, I want it to go to the mouse pointer all the time, not just when I click that flag, but forever. Once I click start, I want it to keep doing that over and over and over again. So I'm going to go into our control section, which is basically just handling all of the logic that goes into our app, all of the kind of functioning parts of our app. And I'm going to choose the forever block and put that in around go to mouse pointer. So now the pencil should follow our mouse no matter what we're doing. Once we click that start symbol and until we click stop, it'll start following that pencil around. Okay. Pretty easy so far. Now the next step is to actually get the pencil to draw, and in the demo of pencils, or the image that we posted on the student project section, we made it so that the pen starts drawing, or the pencil starts drawing, when you tap the space bar. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my events, and we have an event that fires when a certain key is pressed. So I just want to make sure that I grab that, and I'm going to leave it as spacebar, just for example. Later on, as we start to get a little bit farther into the project, you're more than welcome to expand it so that it starts drawing when you press the mouse button. That's a little bit more complicated though, so we're going to use the spacebar for now, and if you want to change it later on, you're more than welcome to. Now, when the spacebar is pressed, what do we want to happen? We want to use that pen tool. So again, in our blocks, I'm just going to look through these and go to the pen section. And there's a few different options for the pen. If you're not familiar with them, clear just erases anything that we've done so far. And again, we're going to use that later on. Stamp basically takes whatever sprite is making the pen, so in this case the pencil, and it makes a copy of it. Okay, the copy doesn't really do anything. It's just literally a stamp. It makes a copy of the image of the sprite rather than the actual sprite itself. Pen down sounds just like what it, or does just like what it sounds like. When you use that, the pen goes down and you can start drawing. Pen up lifts the pen up off of the paper or the stage so it stops drawing. And then we have a few other options for changing the pen color and the size, which we'll get to later on. For now, I'm just going to use pen down under the space key, so that way when we start our app, if I press the space key, I can start drawing. Okay, so already we kind of have the basics of our app ready to go. Again, if I double click on clear, it'll clear any pen marks made by that sprite. And when I start the program the next time, that pen is already down because we haven't done anything to lift it up, to take it off the paper. So no matter what, unless we press pen up, our pen will stay as soon as we've hit the space bar, and then anytime we start the program after that, it'll start off drawing. Okay? So I'm going to clear it again. I'm going to click pen up. Our first bit of logic is just going to be figuring out whether or not the pen is already drawing. If it is, then we're going to lift it up when the space bar is pressed, and if not, then we'll put the pen down. Okay? And to do that, we need to figure out a way to keep track of whether or not the pen is on the paper or not. Okay? And the easiest way to do that is to use what's called a variable. A variable is just kind of a placeholder that lets us store something. So in this case, we're going to make a placeholder called is pencil writing, or something like that. Okay, we're going to use it for all sprites. We'll get into these options in another student project, but for now, we'll just leave it at for all sprites. And then what we're going to do is when our program starts, I want to set is the pencil writing to false or no. No is actually better because we're actually answering the question. One thing to keep in mind is that the values that you put in here in is pencil writing are case sensitive. So if you put a capital in here, you have to use a capital later on when we go to check that. If you use false, you have to use false in the other place. If you're all lowercase letters, you have to use all lowercase letters. It needs to match exactly. So make sure that you keep track of what you're writing in here, or at least checking for it later on. Okay, so now when we start our program, our variable updates, we can see it in the top corner here, the pencil's not writing. We need to put in some logic If the pencil's not writing, then we need to make it write when we press the space bar. And if it's not writing, or sorry, if it is already writing, then we need to lift it up. Okay, so I'm going to go into my controls, and here's where, as I mentioned before, we use our logic. If something is true, do this, or if something is false, do this, otherwise, do something else, or if this is true, do this, or don't do anything else. Okay, in this case, we need something that says, if the pencil is writing, turn it off, otherwise, turn it on. Because those are the only two situations that we'll have, is the pen is either writing or it's not, or the pencil is writing or it's not. So I'm going to use something called an if, then, else block. If blank, then do this, otherwise, or else, do this. Okay, and I know for right now that my first condition is going to be to put the pen down. Okay, otherwise, I need to pick the pen up off the paper. So if something's happening, put the pen down, otherwise put the pen up, because again, those are only two situations that we have. Now, for this blank area, Scratch uses little gems called operators. They're in kind of this gem shape. And if we click on the operators blocks, we'll get all these different options for blocks. So I just want to know whether or not is pencil writing is yes or no. Okay, and I have a block here that looks like a gem that says blank equals blank. And so that's what we're going to use for this. If blank equals blank, in this case, if the pencil is not writing, so if is pencil writing equals no, then put the pen down. Otherwise, put the pen up. Okay? So, if we start this, you'll see it kind of works and kind of doesn't, so just bear with me, we'll fix the problem with it. But for right now, we'll start the program. It's not writing. Our variable is set to no. If we tap the space bar, it starts to write. Okay. If we tap the space bar again, though, it doesn't shut off yet. And if you've been paying attention so far, it's because our variable is still set to is pencil writing no. Okay. Our variable is just a placeholder that we set up. It doesn't actually know if the pen is writing or not. So we have to tell it that, hey, when I put the pen down, that means that the pencil is writing. And when I lift it up, that means the pencil is not writing. Okay. And in order to do that, we're going to use our variable options here and set is pencil writing each time this changes. So when I put the pen down, that means that is pencil writing is true, or yes, the pencil is writing. Otherwise, when I lift the pen up, it's not writing anymore. Okay, I'm doing this just as an example. But now if I start the program, the pen's not writing. If I press spacebar, you'll notice our variable is changing. Okay, and the pen stops writing. Pretty basic. Okay, now, as I mentioned before, when you get into some of the later programs, case is important, and in programming in general, case is important. So I want to make sure that my no matches. Is pencil writing is capitalized up here because that's how I wrote it initially. But we want to make sure it's case sensitive. In certain cases, those two variables don't match. So you want to make sure that when they do whatever action you're trying to do, that they do match so that that condition is triggered. Okay, so if is pencil writing is no, put the pen down, otherwise put the pen up. Okay? Now, if at any point you need to pause the video and rewind to catch up, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to give just a couple minutes. I'll kind of give markers where you can pause the video, but I'm going to keep going through on, and I'll just let you know when's a good time to pause. So if you want to catch up now, go for it, and then we'll move on to the next section in just a second. Okay, so now once you've done that and tested your project, you should have a pen that turns on and turns off each time you press the space bar. Okay. As you're drawing though, you might notice that our pen is actually writing from the middle of the pencil instead of the tip of the pencil. Okay. And the reason that it's doing that is because we have the pencil following the mouse pointer. And when something follows the mouse pointer in Scratch, it always goes from the middle or the anchor point, which is always the middle of the sprite. Okay. So how can we change that? We need our pencil, instead of following the mouse around at the middle, we need to follow it at the tip. Okay, so we can tell just kind of from our scripts that this is going to be a motion thing. We need to move the pen's location, or the pencil's location, a little bit up and a little bit to the right so that the mouse and the pen stick together, or that they're in the same spot. Okay, so here's the block that I have where my mouse pointer, or where my pencil is following the mouse pointer. So an easy way to change that is to just grab these change X and change Y blocks, which literally just means to shift the pencil left and right or up and down. X, if you look at our bottom of our stage here, X is left and right, and it starts off negative 240 over here on the left and goes all the way up to positive 240. And Y is up and down. So we start off with 180 up at the top and negative 180 at the bottom, all the way down at the bottom there. So if we want our pen to move up and to the right, we need to move it up by, let's say, about 25. And that seems pretty close. And then maybe 20 for the X. Maybe a little too much. Let's try 15. We basically want the pencil tip to be right about where the mouse pointer is. So I'm just going to kind of play around with this until they match pretty closely. Maybe 16. 16, that seems about right. So now if you can tell, our pencil is right at the tip of where our mouse cursor is. So now when we actually draw, we'll be drawing with the pencil. But let's test that and see what happens. So I'm going to start my program again. Is pencil writing is no. I'm going to tap the space bar. And whoa, what's happening? We're getting a bunch of little triangles, which looks kind of cool, but it's not exactly what we wanted. Okay. And the reason that's happening is because we have our pencil following the mouse pointer and then immediately moving up and to the right, which is exactly what's happening here. Okay. We have our mouse cursor here. It moves up and to the right, and then starts again to the mouse cursor, up and to the right, mouse cursor, up and to the right. And as we move the pen along, it's basically just trying to kind of make a circle as it's following along. So in order to fix this, what we need to do is kind of fake the actual tip of our pen. As I mentioned earlier, Scratch always draws that pen from the center of whatever sprite is attached to the pen. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new sprite, and we're going to choose, it really doesn't matter what sprite you choose here. I like to pick something circular so that it looks like an actual point, but it doesn't really matter. You could pick a laptop, a muffin, an octopus, any one of these things can be your sprite. But I'm going to pick something like the ball just because it's nice and round and easy to keep track of. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did with my pencil. So I'm going to put in my script here. Actually, instead of doing that, I can actually just drag my blocks to that, and it'll copy them. So now I have two sprites with the same blocks attached to them. I have pencil and I have space, okay? Now, because these change XY were causing that problem for us on the pencil, I'm going to remove those. And I'm also just going to detach the pencil's script so that it's not actually running while we're drawing, and you'll see why in just a second. Now, if I start my program, what you'll notice is that because the dot is following the mouse cursor around, the ball in this case, it's following the mouse cursor around, and because we have the pencil following the mouse cursor around but moving up and to the right, it kind of looks like we have a pencil with a circle at the end of it, okay? And when we press spacebar, that circle is now drawing. Okay, so I like to consider this or pretend like this is the pen tip. Okay, the pencil is just kind of for show. It's not actually doing any of the drawing, and the reason it's not doing any of the drawing is because we disconnect it here. And it's actually the pen tip that's doing the drawing. Okay. Now, obviously, we don't want that ball to show up all the time. So I'm going to make a few modifications to my blocks here. First of all, because the pen's no longer, or the pencil's no longer doing the drawing, I'm going to scrap these blocks because we don't need them anymore. The only thing we need the pencil to do is when we start the program, we need the pencil to set its size to 35% and follow the mouse pointer with our up and to the right changes. Okay, so I don't even need this variable anymore under the pencil. Okay, but now if I switch to the ball, we do want that variable because the ball is now controlling what's actually writing with the pen. We want the ball to set its size to something small, so maybe in this case we'll do 25% and just get it nice and small, maybe even 10%. Again, we want it to kind of look like a pen tip so that you can see kind of where the pen is actually going to be drawing from. Okay. And then our other logic for the spacebar still works. Okay. Now I'm going to stop the program for a second. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Just pause the video whenever you'd like. What I want you to do now is see if you can figure out a way to keep the pen writing and keep the program the same way that we have it, but hide that ball so that it looks like the pencil is actually drawing, is actually making the pen marks, even though it's not. Right now, the pen tip is making the marks, but we don't want people to see that pen tip. So I'm going to let you pause the video right now, and then we'll check it out and see how we do that in just a second. Okay, hopefully you were able to figure that out. I'm going to clear our stage and just verify we still have our little ball there. The way we're going to get rid of that is in the ball sprite, so I need to make sure that our pen tip, in fact, I'm going to rename it pen tip so that we know what we're referring to from now on. We've got our pencil and pen tip, and I'm calling it a pen tip instead of a pencil tip because the actual tool in Scratch is called a pen, but it doesn't really matter one way or the other. But our pen tip, under the look section, one of the blocks that we have is a block that allows you to hide that sprite. So now if I start the program, our pen tip hides, it's still drawing, so now it looks like our pencil is drawing. Okay. All right, so for the past couple minutes as we've been working on this, I've kept going to the pen section and double clicking on clear to clear our artboard, but now is a perfect time to get our Scratch program to actually just have a button that allows us to erase anything. Okay, so I'm going to clear up my board a little bit. I'm going to remove our variable. It's still there, we just don't need to see it anymore now that we know for sure it's working. and I'm going to add another sprite, and this time we want something that symbolizes clearing or erasing, or something that will just kind of get the point across that we want to clear the canvas or the stage in Scratch. I don't see anything. Maybe an X would be good. We also have a street cleaner, and I think the street cleaner is the one that we used on the website. So I'm going to choose that, our street cleaner. Okay. So now my street cleaner sprite, I'll put it in the corner here. I'll put my when flag is clicked so that when our program starts, we can run a few things. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before by changing the size. I definitely want the size changed when we run this. Maybe move it over into the corner here. Okay, so now when our program runs, our little street cleaner is in the corner there. Now, we need to make our street cleaner actually do something, and we only want that to happen when we either click on that sprite, or you can do it when the pencil is touching the sprite. I'm going to show you how to do it when you click on that sprite, and if you want to extend that further and change it so that you just have to move the pencil over the street cleaner, then it clears the stage. I just like to use the clicking one because it's very deliberate. It means you have to actually click to get it to do what you wanted it to do. And Scratch has a event specially made for that, that only responds when you've actually clicked with the mouse on that section. Okay, and it's called when this sprite is clicked. Okay. Now, our first instinct is probably to go to the pen tool and grab the clear block and attach it to that. So now we press space. We can draw something, press space again to stop drawing, and now when we click on this, it clears our stage. Okay. Now, this isn't the case for everything. The clear block is actually one of the few blocks in Scratch, at least as far as the pen is concerned, that applies to any sprites. So if I press clear anywhere, it'll clear all the pen marks on the stage. But as we'll see later on, some of these other pen tools only apply to the actual sprite that's making the marks. So we'll want to keep track of that as we're working through this. Okay, so that was pretty easy. We now have a basic paint program that draws. You can stop and start the drawing. And then we can clear our stage and start over. Okay, so now our next goals are to set up different colors so that we can switch between the colors of our pen, and then a larger and smaller block. So if you want to, we'll start with the colors, and if you want to go ahead and experiment with that, now's a great time to pause the video and try it out, and then I'll show you guys how to do that when you get back. So go ahead and pause the video if you'd like, and take a few seconds to try it out yourself. Okay, so now that we're back, we are going to add another sprite. And this time, I'm going to just choose a couple sprites. We want to be able to change the color to a few different things. So I'm actually going to choose some things that are symbolic kind of that color. So in this case, it looks like we have bananas, apples, and I thought I saw an orange somewhere. Oranges, there we go. So we'll use fruits as our colors, but again, you're free to use anything you want. So I'm going to grab these, and our color changing stuff will be up here in the corner. Just like we did before, I'm going to set the size to something a little bit more reasonable. And that's maybe too small. There we go. That seems about right. I'm going to add in our bananas and do the same, 50%. And then I'll grab our orange. I'm going to grab this one just because it matches the other ones a little bit better. And actually the orange might already be the right size, so we might be good there. So now I've got an apple, some bananas, and some oranges. Okay. And let's add in our flags. You don't always have to add in this when flag clicked to everything. But I like to do it because when we set up options like sizes and things like that, it makes it a lot easier to guarantee that somebody hasn't messed with the size of the objects. Because other people can remix your Scratch project and kind of make their own versions of it, we don't want them messing with that stuff in ours. So I like to make sure that the person that's using it always has the same experience no matter what, and this just kind of guarantees that when we start the program, the apple's going to be the right size, the bananas will be the right size, and the orange will be the right size. So, okay, we've got that. Our program starts. We've got our fruit in the corner. So now let's first set up the apple. We're going to set up the apple so that when you click on it, okay, it changes the color of our pen to red. The banana is going to change it to yellow, and the orange will change it to orange. So we'll start with the apple, and we've already used the when this sprite is clicked event, like we did with the street cleaner and the eraser. So it should be pretty simple to add when this sprite is clicked, set the pen color to red. And the way that the color chooser works is you have a little block here. You can click on that, and then anything that you click on after that, whatever color it is, you'll kind of see it changing as I'm moving around. But whatever color the item that you click on is, that's the color that that block is going to be set to. So I want to make sure that we set it to red. So I'm going to click on that apple just to match it. And then I'm going to add that right under our when this sprite is clicked, set pen color to red. So what you might think should happen, just like it did with the street cleaner, is that when I go around here and I start drawing, if I click on the apple, our pen should be red. But as you can clearly see, it's not. Okay. Even if I click it while I'm drawing, nothing's happening. Okay. This might be a little confusing. If you actually look at our blocks here on the right-hand side, when we run our program, Scratch highlights the blocks that fire when they're running. So in the case of the street cleaner, if I click on that, you can clearly see that it is highlighting it in yellow, which means that that part of the script is running. Same thing with the apple. If I click on the apple, that's running too. So why is our pencil not changing to the right color? And the answer is pretty easy. I mentioned it a little bit just a few minutes ago in the beginning of this video. But the answer is that every single sprite in Scratch has its own pen. Okay? And what I mean by that is if I add, or when space key is pressed and pen down, like we did when we started our app, check out what happens. I hit the space bar, this starts drawing. Okay? But if I move the apple around, it doesn't look like it does it when the apple moves around, but maybe if I move it like this. Yeah, there you go. If the apple moves around, you'll see it's also drawing. Okay, and we don't really want that. So let me move the apple back. The apple has its own pen and the pencil has its own pen. Okay? So what we need to do is we actually don't want to set the pen color of the apple. We want to set the pen color of the pencil. Okay, so what we need to do, we need another way to keep track of what is the current pen color that we're using. And just like we kept track of whether or not our pencil was writing, we're going to make a variable that just says pen color. Okay. I like to leave the first letter lowercase and only capitalize every letter after that, because in most programming language, that's how things are set up. But in this case, the variable names don't really make a difference. Just make sure that you're consistent wherever you use that. So again, I'm going to leave it as for all sprites. And now I have a pen color. Okay. I'm going to go back to my pen tip. I'm going to set the pen color when we start to blue. Okay. And then I'm actually going to set the pen color to blue also. So keep in mind, remember what we did with the is pencil writing. The variable doesn't actually know or keep track of what the actual color of the pencil is. It's only a placeholder for us so that we can keep track of it. Okay, we still need to do something to actually change the color of the pencil when that happens. So in this case, I'm just making sure that when we start our program, the pen color variable is set to blue, and then I actually set the pen color to blue. Okay, and the reason that I need to do that is because I need the apple when it's clicked to be able to change the pen color, and you'll see how that works in just a second. So now, when I start my program, the pen starts off as blue. I draw, it is indeed blue. And I can clear it. And now when I click on the apple, when this sprite is clicked under the apple, I want our variable pen color to change to red. Okay. So now if I run the program, I'm going to start drawing. Yep, it's blue. If I click on this, it changes to red, and this is still blue. Okay, so what we need to do is go back into our pen tip, and now when the space key is pressed, right now we're just checking if the pencil is writing, and if it is, put the pen down, otherwise set the pencil to yes. Okay? But what we should also do is change the color when we press the spacebar. Now, you can do this one of two ways. We're going to set it up so that it only changes the pen color when you start drawing again, because in most cases, you're not going to want to start drawing like here and then have it change just when you go back and click on that, because then you'll have a bunch of lines going to the apple and then away from the apple and then to the banana and from the banana as you go to change colors. And that's not really usable or useful in any case. So I'm only going to set this up when the pencil goes down. We're going to set that color. So we're going to use some more logic. And we used is pencil writing, then do this, otherwise do this. And now we're going to do before our pen down. Move that. So now before we put the pen down on the paper, I want to check what color the pen is. Okay, so again, I'm going to use my operator gems. And I'm going to say if pen color is red, and again, I want to use the same upper lowercase letters just to be consistent, then change the pen to red. So again, I'm going to click my little color box, click the color that I want. So if pen color is red, set the pen color to red. Okay. And now when I start my program, my pen is blue, still blue, but now if I click on red, it turns to red. Okay. I'm going to clear it, and I start our program back again, the pen resets to blue. And like I said, notice that when I click on the apple, the pen stays blue unless I turn the pen on and off again. Okay, so that just makes it a little bit more useful because now I can draw something, restart my program, draw, click, draw. Okay, so if the pen color is red, set the pen there. Just in case we haven't put in another item in there, but I'm going to let you guys set up the banana and the orange. So when you come back, we'll see what that looks like, and hopefully you figured out how to do that. So go ahead and pause the video now and see if you can finish off the other two. Okay, so hopefully you were able to figure out how to do that. It's not too difficult. I'm just going to click through each of our sprites so you can see what we did. We did exactly the same thing. When the sprite is clicked, set the pen color to red. On the banana, when the sprite is clicked, set it to yellow. And on the orange, when it's clicked, set the pen color to orange. And then on the pen tip, we just added more if statements. So in this case, if the pen color is red, set it to red. If the pen color is yellow, set it to yellow. If the pen color is orange, set it to orange. Once all those are done, put the pen down and set is the pencil writing to yes. Okay. Let's test it. Just make sure it works. We have blue. I click on apple, I get red. Click on the yellow, yellow. Click on the orange, I get orange. Now I can clear that. Okay, so now that we know that our pen color variable is working too, people don't really need to see that variable. You can leave it up there if you want. You can also right click up here and choose a normal readout, a large readout, so that way people can see what the color is if you want. I think it's pretty obvious what color it is when they start writing, so I don't think we really need to do that, but you're more than welcome to do that if you want. Just make sure you leave enough room depending on what sizes your letters are. I'm going to hide our pen color. When people click on the fruit that they want, they know exactly which color they want, and because it doesn't change until they turn the pen back on, they could technically click on any one of these and it won't turn until they press that back. So I don't think it's necessary to show that. Again, if you want to show it, you're more than welcome to. But that's getting us close to where we're at. So now our next and final part of the Spark Painter is we want to set up some sprites to change the size, bigger and smaller. So I'm just going to add the sprites. Again, we need to pick something that's at least close to symbolic for bigger and smaller. So I think on the actual post for this student project, we picked a bug or a beetle. And then I think we also picked a dinosaur for bigger, which somehow seems to make sense. So we're going to add those sprites. We're going to do the same thing that we did for our others. When the sprite is clicked, or sorry, when the green flag is clicked, make sure that we set our size to the size that we want. And I'm going to try to keep these all the same height. That's really what I'm worried about here. So these should be good. They're all close to the same height. If we drew a line, it would probably be a little bit off, but we just want to keep them about the same height so that when somebody goes to click on them, it's obvious which one they were trying to click. We don't want to have something super tiny that makes it impossible for them to click on it. Okay, so now we have a bug and a dinosaur. So again, here's another perfect spot to pause the video. See if you can figure out how to make the pen larger and smaller based on what we've figured out so far. When you come back, we'll walk through it and I'll show you how to do that. All right, welcome back. And we're going to walk through how to change our pen size from bigger to smaller. Now, if you've been following along with everything else so far, it's probably going to be pretty obvious how to use what we've already learned to do the same thing. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing that we did for the colors, but with some small differences. So I'm going to add our events when the sprite is clicked, just like we did for the other stuff. Okay. And as before, we can't just add our pen options to change the pen size because of the fact that, as with the fruits before and any other sprites, each sprite still has its own pen. So we need to somehow make it so that our pencil size updates, our pencil's pen size, or the pen tip size updates. Okay. So again, we're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it pen size. So now we have a variable for our pen color that we were using and a pen size variable. Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit since we don't want it covering up those items. But for the most part, we're going to set this up exactly the same way. When this sprite is clicked, I'm going to change the pen size by 1 because it's the dinosaur. 1 is positive, meaning it gets bigger. On the beetle, I'm going to do the same thing and change the pen size, but I'm going to change this to a -1 so that it gets smaller. Okay. And then I'm going to go back to my pen tip, and when the space key is pressed, if the pencil is writing, no, do all of our other stuff, put the pen down here. Now I'm going to use that pen size. Okay. And actually, before we do that, that's not what we want to do. Almost got you there. We want to change the variable by 1, not the actual pen size, because again, that only changes the pen size for those sprites. So I actually made the mistake that we mentioned at the beginning. Okay, so now let's go ahead and jump to our pen tip. And now, if the pencil isn't writing, then now we're actually going to change the pen size to whatever is stored in our pen size variable. Okay, so when we press the space key, check our colors first, and then no matter what, set the pen size to the size of our pen. Okay, this is just the first step. You'll probably see an issue with this right when we start. So start drawing. I click the dinosaur, click the dinosaur, click the dinosaur. Okay, and then when I click the beetle, okay. So you probably noticed the issue right away. We started it off by pressing the dinosaur a couple times, and so you'll kind of see the issue. And let's just crank this up to an obnoxious number like 20. Okay, that works, right? But watch what happens if I keep going down. Okay, so here's our problem. Scratch can't set a pen size. It's impossible to set a pen size that's a negative number. Okay, there is a maximum pen size, and I would recommend making a maximum pen size, but there's also a minimum. It can't be smaller than 0. It actually can't even be 0. We have to have a pen that's at least 1 pixel in size, because otherwise it won't draw anything, and Scratch actually just ignores it if it's lower than 0. But I've set the pen size to -21, and if somebody starts drawing, okay, they might assume that when they click the dinosaur, it's going to get bigger. Okay, but the issue is, because we've clicked the small one so many times that it's a negative number, the pen size isn't actually going to change until we get all the way back around to the positive numbers. Okay, so we need to put in some logic into our program that basically says if it gets to 0, or actually if it gets to 1, don't go any lower. And if it gets above a certain value, I'll probably cap it at 20. But if it gets above 20, cap that too. Don't make the change. Okay, so again, we're going to use our control blocks. I'm going to grab my operator. And I actually want less than. So if pen size is less than 20, change the pen size by 1. Make it go 1 higher. Okay. Now, what's interesting to point out here is that the pen size, because we're only using less than, will never get to 21. It'll only get to 20 because once that number equals 20, pen size is no longer less than 20. It's actually equal to 20 at that point. Okay, and then for Beetle, we're going to do the same thing but opposite. We're going to add our condition, grab our operator gem, and say if pen size is greater than 2, because we don't ever really want it to drop to 0, it has to be 1. So if pen size is greater than 2, then change it by -1. At which point, if it ever equals 1, it's no longer greater than 2. They'll no longer be able to change the pen size until we make it bigger again. Clear our stage. Let's try this out, make sure it works. Pen size is 5. I click, and I'm just watching this screen right here. Just fix that really quick. Hopefully we can't go bigger than 20. There we go. That's the biggest size we got. So we can't go any bigger than 20 because if the pen size is bigger than 20, that's the only, or sorry, less than 20, that's the only time that it changes. And on the Beetle, the pen size has to be bigger than 1. If it's not bigger than 1, it doesn't work. You can't go down below 1. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. And now we have a fully working paint program. Okay, you can feel free to extend this even further. You can add additional colors to it. I also like to change this to the large readout so that it just kind of sits there what size the pen is at all times, so that way the person knows before they start drawing. With colors, it's one thing because they can always just click on the color that they want to get started, but with the pen size, because we're only going bigger and smaller, there's no way for them to directly influence that, so we want to make sure that we're showing them the pen. and then we have our clear button. All right, so now the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the option to our pencil that if somebody clicks the mouse, it'll actually draw a pencil or whatever we change our pencil to. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. So right now, if we click the mouse, nothing happens. Okay, I can click the mouse all I want and nothing happens because we set the space bar as our option to turn the pencil on and off. I'm going to set up pen tool, the stamp. And what happens with the stamp is you'll notice when I double clicked on it, you kind of can't see it, but it actually makes a copy of the pencil. It's not the actual pencil itself, it's just the picture of the pencil. Okay? So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use our conditions again. If some condition is true, then stamp. And now we're going to introduce a new condition, and that condition is under the sensing options. These are some special options that only happen, that they're only true if the condition that it says on the sensing block is true. So in this case, if it's touching a specific item, which you can also use, as I mentioned earlier, to fire these color change events or the size events. I don't think that's really useful in a paint program to just do it when they touch, but you have that option. And most importantly, we have the option to check if the mouse is down. So if the mouse is down, then stamp. Okay, so I'm going to stop my program, clear it, start it up again, and now the mouse still follows this, but if I click, I get a copy of the pencil. Okay, so if I hold the mouse down, it's going to continually do that. If I just click once, it just makes one copy of the pencil. Okay, now what's cool about this, what's cool about the stamp, is that on the pencil, we can actually change the costumes on the pencil. So if I want to load up another sprite, and just as an example, make an airplane instead, now when I stamp this, I get an airplane. If I add another sprite, I get that. Okay, our drawing still works from where the mouse is, so that's still based on our pencil. But our stamp tool now uses whatever stamp or whatever picture, whatever costume we use for our actual pencil. Okay, so that's pretty much Spark Painter. If you want to, you can feel free to extend this even further, as I mentioned before. A few different things that you can try are using some of those other blocks to add additional colors. Maybe you want to add an additional feature where instead of having to tap spacebar, you actually just click the mouse to draw, and then the stamp happens when you press the spacebar. That's something that you can try. You can also maybe try to do a background color and a foreground color, so you can add in the option to change the stage. Or maybe you actually want to add the different stamps down here along the bottom so that when somebody clicks on it, the costume of the pencil changes and becomes whatever item you want it to become. So that way you can stamp a bunch of different things. So there's a few different things that you can try. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. If you have any questions, join our Slack channel at sparkappleague.slack.com. If you have a Gilbert Schools email address or one of the local school email addresses, you should automatically be able to sign up for that. If not, just send us an email to admin@sparkappleague.com and I will send you an invite as soon as I can. If you have any questions, Slack is the best place to get a hold of me. Otherwise, enjoy, have fun, and we'll see you next week for our week 2 student project, Pong, Spark Pong. See you then. Bye-bye.